Hi, my name is Quickened, and this is going to be my book review of the year 2022. This will be a mix of fiction and manga, and this is not just books I loved, it is books I loved, didn't really like, and then didn't finish. I'm going to start it off with Cormac McCarthy's The Road. You've probably heard me talk about this on other social media if you follow me elsewhere, so I will keep it brief. I started this new year, I believe, of this year, and this was my first experience with Cormac McCarthy. Now, when I was looking for book recommendations, a ton of people told me to avoid this book, so obviously I went and purchased it right away. The Road is a story of post-apocalyptic Earth, but what is unique about this story is it is not a zombie story or a pandemic story. It is the story of what would happen if the Earth dies. The trees stop growing, the animals stop living. What happens then? The story follows a father and son, and they are heading to the coast, hopefully to beat the cold winters. This was my first experience with Cormac McCarthy, and getting used to his writing style was a little bit difficult for me at first. This is a, 200, 300 some page book, and reading it actually goes by really quickly because a lot of it is dialogue. Cormac McCarthy's writing style does not include a lot of punctuation, a lot of comma, quotation marks, so getting used to his writing style is a bit of an adjustment. Here I'll read you a passage. We need to get out of the road. Why, Papa? Someone's coming. Is it bad guys? Yes, I'm afraid so. They could be good guys, couldn't they? He didn't answer. He looked at the sky out of old habit, but there was nothing to see. What are we gonna do, Papa? Let's go. Can we go back to the fire? No, come on. We probably don't have much time. I'm really hungry. I know. What are we going to do? We have to hold up, get off the road. Will they see our tracks? Yes. What can we do about it? I don't know. Will they know what we are? What? If they see our tracks, will they know what we are? He looked back at the great round tracks in the snow. They'll figure it out, he said. Then he stopped. We need to think about this. Let's go back to the fire. After I really enjoyed The Road, I took the rest of my New Year's vacation to go to the store and pick up other Cormac McCarthy books. This isn't going to be a complete Cormac fan review because I didn't like some of these books. Other books I really liked. I will start with Outer Dark. Outer Dark is this story of a brother and sister that takes place in Appalachia. Now, if you don't have a lot of experience with Appalachian themes, iconography, any of it, what I really like about this book is, although it's very strong with Cormac's usual dialogue, everything is spelled phonetically, and it takes really good care to have that, Appalachian flair to it. Now, the story itself is of a brother and sister who have a baby and dispose of the baby, and then the rest of the story is the sister trying to get the baby back. Now, obviously this is a dark theme, and Cormac does a really good job of talking about the uncomfortable and putting the human experience out there. The story does not get full-on twisted until the very end. The baby is already conceived by the time we start the book. Now, Child of God is the other Cormac McCarthy book, and you can see by my bookmark I did stop reading this. This story has the same almost setting and feel of Outer Dark, where it takes place in this kind of Appalachian time period with a lot of phonetic dialogue. However, this story was just a little too grim for me to be able to kind of see past that stuff and enjoy. I found myself feeling horrible about it. So while Cormac can show you a little bit of that dark humanity, he also can push it. So there is, I stopped on page 85 of Child of God. After my Cormac binge, I decided to revisit an old favorite, and that is V.C. Andrews' Flowers in the Attic. Now, this story has its own kind of controversies, and aside from controversies, sometimes it's also considered a YA book, a young adult book. But Flowers in the Attic is a story by V.C. Andrews, and I think V.C. Andrews has this really strong voice in her stories that paints this very dreamy, pastel kind of horror that I really like. After finding out that V.C. Andrews is categorized as a gothic horror author, I thought that it was worth it to revisit a lot of her stories, and I think with that in mind, it was really this nice, dreamy kind of place that it takes you. I love the old-timey kind of dialogue and the descriptions, and there's just something about her voice I really like. Now, Flowers in the Attic is a story about 4 siblings, and their father dies. Now, their mother has this very, very rich family, but they can't find out that she has these children. So she ends up hiding them away in the attic on her family's estate, visited once a day by the grandmother to feed them. Now, this story, however horrible that is, one thing I really like about it is it doesn't contain any magic or any sci-fi or anything like that. Like, the twins don't have special powers. Everything is almost real because it could happen. Strong female narration, something I really like. The exploration and growing up. Now, there are adult themes in this book as well, but I really like the writing. I followed that up with the sequel, which is Petals on the Wind. There are 4 books in the Flowers in the Attic series, maybe 5, if you count, I think the one ghost-written. I think that Petals on the Wind, it has a great start. Definitely worth it. Not a sequel that lets you down at all. However, while I was reading Petals on the Wind, I was doing some research on V.C. Andrews and found out that she had one book that was not a continued series. It was a standalone book, and that was My Sweet Audrina. So this year I read My Sweet Audrina after I kind of became obsessed with these window books that V.C. Andrews makes. And I have to recommend My Sweet Audrina, especially if you don't want to touch these books, or if you want a little taste of V.C. Andrews and her writing. Now, to be warned, V.C. Andrews, after a certain year, is written by a ghostwriter, so do look that up. I think My Sweet Audrina is the last book she wrote. Double check that. So again, haunting dialogue, no magic, very possible situation. This is the story of a girl whose parents keep a very tight eye on her because her older sister of the same name had passed away. Now she is the second child who bears the name of her original sibling and feels like she kind of lives in her shadow. However, the dynamic of the household, you know, keeping her inside, keeping her homeschooled, is just very eerie and like makes you feel caged and feel for her. There are some aspects of the book that almost feel like Addams Family cartoonish, but then after researching the book, I found out that the character of Audrina's cousin in this book has this situation where her bones are very brittle, like a brittle bone disease. And although sometimes the antics of that can feel a little cartoonish in this book, it's actually based off of V.C. Andrews' own experience, so it's not even something outside of the realms of possibility. One thing I will say is, like, although I really enjoyed this book and loved the dream it put me in, like, this much of it kind of sucks. So for Pride, I wanted to read some kind of queer books, and I'll go into them here. And the first thing I'm going to review is Vampeerz. Now, Vampeerz is the story of a girl who, when her grandmother passes away, she notices a girl at the funeral and she doesn't really know who that girl is. she becomes, you know, infatuated with the mystique. And because of this, she finds out that this mysterious girl is actually a vampire. And because of her grandmother's passing, this vampire can now also be laid to rest with some sort of spell or book that has now been left behind from her grandmother. One thing that is pretty interesting about this book that I really thought was a new take on vampires, she can be bitten and not turned into a vampire. She has to decide who to turn it into a vampire. So she can just ask for a little drink of blood when she's feeling a little hungry, and anyone can really donate. So you have these situations where it's a little bit, you know, sucking blood. That's cool. I will say though, one thing that let me down about this book is the vampires have powers, and they have mind control powers, so they can kind of do whatever they want, whenever they want, to anybody. And the vampire uses that to become enrolled in her school, move into her house, because she manipulates the teachers and her parents. So a little bit of a lack of consequence, I guess, there, but we'll see. I do know Vampeerz 2 is on pre-order right now, if you want to check it out. I thought it was a cute story, and the illustrations are amazing. Next is Our Dreams at Dusk. I thought this was a really cute story, and definitely one that leads you into wanting the next book in the series. Our Dreams at Dusk takes place where our main character has been outed at school, and now he is feeling completely hopeless. And in this, he finds a community of outsiders who are helping build houses and have like a community space in his area. I thought that this might be a story I've heard before, but as it explored the other characters who hang out in this like community house, I did become more interested in their story. They are also queer individuals so far who hang out in this community, so I thought that that was pretty interesting, and definitely a book that I feel would grow as the series goes on, but it does leave you on a little bit of a cliffhanger. So if you want to try out this story, I recommend maybe buying 1 or 2 or 3 at a time. Finally, I have Total Eclipse of the Eternal Heart. This is a story where our main character, who is closeted, then finds somebody who is into him and open, and then he finds out that this person is a murderer. And he's like, no way. It gets complicated because the murderer is just a reincarnation of someone who was murdered like 100 years ago and is now back to take revenge. And it's the job of our main character to figure that out and kind of stop it. While I really liked the illustrations in this book, I think it relies on a couple tropes that made me a little uncomfortable. So I actually don't recommend Total Eclipse of the Eternal Heart, even if you're looking for some queer stories. I don't think this is like a really great one to represent your collection. I did look up the author and grabbed his other book, Go For It Nakamura, which is also a queer book. So I had hopes for this, so I haven't read this yet, but I haven't given up all hope. So one book I also read was Kami Can't Communicate. So this was a pretty popular manga this year. It also came out with a anime that I think is on Netflix. And Kami Can't Communicate is the story of this girl. She's calm, cool, collected at school, and then everybody thinks she is so great because she has this mystique. But really, she has this secret problem where she has a hard time publicly communicating. So the mystique around her is actually what is harming her socially. One of her classmates kind of finds that out, and it becomes his duty to socialize her in a way where she can communicate. I felt like my unpopular opinion was I didn't really love this story. only because I felt like I've heard it before. This is a story that people really like, and they say that this is nice, slice of life, easy reading. So if you're into that, I was actually at a bookstore recently and recommended this to somebody, so you might like it. That was my opinion on it. Which brings me to Soap and Sweat. This is a popular book among spicy manga community, and the first book I really liked. This is the story of a woman. She's at work and she works at a soap fragrance kind of place, cosmetics. And one of her coworkers passes by and really likes the way she smells. I guess her chemistry is really good with these soaps, so he is testing fragrances on her and they become a little something something. Little work romance kind of situation. Now, I really like the first book, but where it kind of devolves my interest here is our main character feels like, you know, very hesitant, very like, I don't even know if he likes me, and then becomes very jealous of his other coworkers. And to me, that's just like not a story I want to keep reading. Although I want him to like reassure her and all of that stuff, just I feel like I can't put that energy in my head as entertainment, as leisure. Good spice, but the underlying story that maybe you're not even supposed to get that involved in, I pass up. Now, I did start reading All the Pretty Horses by Cormac McCarthy, and it has a lot of Spanish in it, so I did put this down for a second because I feel like in order to enjoy this book, you need your phone to translate. And I'm mostly reading at night to unwind, and this was my pick for my nightly routine. And, you know, by the 10th page of Spanish, I was like, oh, I can't read that. I tried to be like, oh, I know what that says, but I kind of didn't. Now, I don't know a lot of Spanish, so if you know a little bit more Spanish than me, you might enjoy All the Pretty Horses. It is the book that like jumped off Cormac's career. I think there's 2 or 3 books in this series, and I bought all of them without realizing that. So this is a book I feel like would be good if you're on the bus or something and your phone is with you. You can translate, so I do want to read this. But for some reason or another, my nightly routine turned into horror manga. So if you follow me on stream, this is a manga I bought completely on accident, and it's an omnibus, so it's like, girl, did you accidentally spend $30? And you didn't notice? And I guess so. So Gantz is the story of these 2 chaps who are hit by a train, and then they're suddenly alive again, even though they were so sure that they had passed away. Now they find out that in exchange for them to be alive, they have to play this game. And they're not fully aware of what the game entails, but they end up in a parallel world to Japan, where everything is as it seems, except they are able to see these creatures, aliens, and they have to kill them. And every round that they are successful, they get to go back to live their normal life as if they weren't dead until they are called back to the game. And if they die in the game, they die in real life. So a little Squid Game-esque in a way. A little dystopian in a way. I had a hard time reading this book because this is a very hyper-sexualized book. On stream, I was talking about how I was so surprised that this is sold in stores, not wrapped in plastic, if you know what I mean. And then I went to the store and it is wrapped in plastic. This did end on a cliffhanger, so I did purchase Part 2, which is coming in the mail. I have heard from people that this series goes on for ever and ever, and I only kind of liked it. Yes, I got part 2, but I only kind of liked it. But if you are looking for a sexed up Squid Game, this is the book for you. Now, another giant book that I really did like is Drifting Classroom. I bought this last year, but just got around to reading it like a month ago. And this is the story of a school that just disappears. And the town can see a giant hole where the school used to be, but the children are gone. Now the children, their whole school just dropped somewhere else in what seems like a desert, suddenly confronted with their own survival. This is a story of a bunch of humans reacting to being in a situation which is pretty clearly life and death, but most of the characters in this book are like 7 years old. So they're crying, they're peeing, they're dying. One thing I really liked about this book is the art style is very old school. And I thought the story was pretty original. Now you can only really get these in these omnibus books, which will cost you like $38, $40. And mine is actually kind of ruined, so I'm a little sad for the collector's value of that. However, I did order book 2. I look forward to seeing where this goes. So, honorable mention to Chainsaw Man. This book has gone super crazy in the last year, 2 years, and I thought that this was a pretty good book. Now, the anime has started, so you may be familiar with this story. But what I like is this is a shonen story, but a little bit more hyped up. It would probably be on Adult Swim and not just Cartoon Network, which is really good because sometimes I'm watching My Hero Academia and I'm like, is this show for babies? So if you feel that way, this is the call to your baby dilemma. Chainsaw Man is kind of this classic story where you have your guy, he's hard on his luck and he's ready to do what he needs to do to make some money, have some shelter, have a meal, and see some boobies. And him doing whatever it takes is kind of that like sell your soul to the devil type story. And I really look forward to seeing where it goes. I like that it is that hyped up shonen. One thing you might run into trouble with if you want to enjoy this series though is it's kind of hard to get your hands on. Right here I have 245. So I haven't dove into the series yet because I have been having a hard time getting the books, but if you can get the books, I like them. Honorable mention to FIreforce. I think if you like Chainsaw Man, you might like FIreforce as well, or vice versa. I thought that this was a cute little story. I was able to get a lot of these for really cheap, so I thought I would go for it because I've seen some cool people recommend it. And I think it is like a nice, different take on a shonen classic. So we have our main character, and he has kind of a mutated special power that allows him to be on this firefighting force. And they're a unique force that kind of take people who are spontaneously combusting, which has now become a problem in the population. And they come, they put out the fire. The team has different powers where they can put the spirit to rest and everything like that. And while that is a unique story, you're still gonna run into the same tropes where, like, you know, he's silly and he's like this. So it's cool. Definitely like a cute little shonen story with a little bit of action, a little bit of Adult Swim. This year, I also started reading Handmaid's Tale. So I have an unpopular opinion, I guess, about Handmaid's Tale, and it was pretty hard to read. So I watched the Handmaid's Tale on Hulu, and after I canceled my Hulu, I was still like, that was a really good show though. Like, I have to give it to that show. It was good. And I wanted to read the book almost to fill in the gaps from where I stopped watching the show. One thing I will say about reading this book in book form is it jumps around in the timeline with enough frequency that it makes things a little confusing. But on the television show, that builds and it adds a lot of context without having a narrator. However, in this book, jumping back and forth is kind of difficult because we haven't met all the characters yet. I think I was able to get through this book because I had the memory bank of the TV show to kind of fill in the gaps where I was confused. I will say I did get the part 2 of this book, the sequel, which I think only came out in like a few years ago, and I want to really enjoy this book. Margaret Atwood obviously creates the books of my favorite genre, and I have picked up a few more of her books, so I just wanted to put it out there. If you are like me, this was a little difficult to read. The last manga I read of the year is I Am a Hero, and right now I'm currently on book 3. I think I started book 1 last year, but continue to read this story. I think in a lot of zombie movies and media, gun is a huge part of it. If it's acquiring a gun, getting ammo, losing your gun, lots of gun stuff. What makes this story unique is that in Japan, not many people have a gun. So our hero of the story, he has a gun because he does like a rifle club or something like that. So it's very uncommon that he would have access to one. The focus of the story is really about him, and he is kind of polite and aloof, and there are parts of the book where he just will not believe that people are turning into zombies. He's saying, "Excuse me, sorry." He's paying the taxi driver who is so clearly a zombie. He's trying to feed his girlfriend, etc. So one thing about this, the imagery is very gory, graphic, but intricate and done well. And I feel like it shows just kind of a level of illustration that isn't hyper cute, hypersexualized. It's very like graphic novel, done well, done in a realistic way, which I think can be really cool. These are all of the books I enjoyed in 2022, minus any audiobook or digital thing that I read. And I'm sure I'm missing something else. There were a few books I could not place, but I don't know. If you would like a full book tour collection or manga collection, definitely let me know in the comments down below. And if you plan on reading any of these. If you like videos like this, let me know, and it has been a pleasure. Happy New Year to everybody, and bye!